When you look at where the 49ers are right now, it's honestly hard not to feel like something quietly positive is happening behind the scenes. On the surface, the season is over and emotions are still raw. But this is one of those moments where the context really matters. The Niners didn't just get one piece of good news, they got a cluster of developments that, taken together, actually change how you should be thinking about this offseason. And that's why I wanted to slow this down and talk it through with you, because this isn't just optimism for optimism's sake. There are real reasons to feel encouraged right now. The biggest thing to understand is that the timing of everything matters. Injuries, coaching movement around the league, and roster decisions are all colliding at once, and for once, the 49ers are landing on the right side of that chaos. There's a narrative floating around that this team is heading into an uncertain offseason, but the deeper you look, the more you realize. The foundation is a lot more stable than it might seem at first glance, and stability is everything when you're trying to stay in a championship window. One question keeps coming up, and I want you to think about it honestly as we go through this together. Right now, yes or no, do you believe Robert Saleh will be the defensive coordinator for the 49ers next season? Don't overthink it. Just go with your gut and lock in your answer. We're going to come back to this later, and by the time we do, I think your confidence level might be very different than it is right now. What makes this moment so interesting is that the league itself is doing the 49ers a few favors. Coaching jobs are opening, candidates are piling up, and not every situation is nearly as attractive as it looks on paper. At the same time, the 49ers are quietly putting themselves in a position where continuity actually makes sense, especially on defense. And when you combine that with what we're learning about player health, it starts to feel like this offseason could be more about fine-tuning than rebuilding. Before we get deeper into all of that, do me a favor. If you enjoy talking for Niners like this, in a straightforward, no-nonsense way, hit subscribe and help this channel push toward 1,000 subscribers. It makes a huge difference, and you won't miss any of the offseason coverage that's coming. Also, drop a quick comment with your yes or no on Saleh, because I want to see where everyone's head is at right now. Now, to really understand why this development matters, we have to start with the health of this team, because that's where the optimism actually begins. And once you hear these injury updates, you'll see why the offseason outlook feels a lot different than it did just a short time ago. Once you dig into the injury upgrades, this is where the optimism really starts to feel justified. Because it's one thing to talk about culture and coaching stability, but it's another thing entirely when your core players are actually heading into the offseason without lingering medical questions hanging over them. And for the 49ers, that's exactly what's happening right now, which honestly doesn't get talked about enough. Start with George Kittle, because this was the one that had everyone holding their breath. Hearing that his surgery went well is great, but the details are what really matter here. A clean tear, no drilling into the heel, better blood flow, and a quicker recovery timeline than worst case scenarios. That's about as good as it gets when you're talking about an Achilles injury. He's already starting rehab, and the fact that the tear was higher and away from the heel is a massive deal for long-term explosiveness. It doesn't erase the injury, but it absolutely changes how to project his return and his effectiveness next season. Then you move to Brock Purdy, and this one might actually be even bigger in a different way. No surgery, no procedures, no lingering treatment needed for the foot or the big toe. That means he gets a normal offseason. No rehab timetable dictating his throwing schedule, no setbacks, no altered mechanics because he's compensating for pain. For a quarterback still early in his career, that's huge. Development happens in the offseason, and Brock Purdy getting a clean runway matters more than most people realize. And then there's Fred Warner, which almost felt like a non-update until you think about it. No additional procedures, no surgery, just slowing things down and focusing on the small stuff. The fact that it was even a question probably surprised you like it surprised me, but the answer couldn't have been better. Business as usual. When your defensive leader is entering the offseason without anything holding him back, that sets the tone for the entire unit. So here's where I want to hear from you. Which of these updates makes you feel the best about next season? Kittle, Purdy, or Warner? Drop one name in the comments, and if you're feeling a little extra confident after hearing all this, tap the like button so more Niners fans see this breakdown. Because when you step back, this isn't just about three players being healthy, it's about clarity. The 49ers aren't guessing anymore. They know where these guys stand. They can plan normally. And that kind of certainty feeds directly into coaching decisions and roster planning. And that brings us right back to the biggest question hovering over this offseason, which is what happens on the defensive side of the ball, and whether continuity is about to work in the 49ers' favor in a very real way. Now this is where things get really interesting, because the Robert Saleh situation isn't just speculation anymore. When you look at how the rest of the league is shaping up, it's starting to feel like the odds are quietly tilting in the 49ers' favor, even if that hasn't fully sunk in yet. This isn't about hoping he stays. It's about understanding why the market around him suddenly looks a lot different than it did not that long ago. Start with the number of open head coaching jobs. On paper, that sounds like bad news, right? More openings usually mean more chances for someone to get pulled away, but that only matters if those jobs are actually attractive and if the coach in question is a clear favorite. And that's the key part here. Robert Saleh is respected, but he's not the frontrunner anywhere. In fact, when you look at how teams are ranking their candidates, he's rarely even in the top tier. A lot of these teams are clearly leaning offensive. Buffalo is a perfect example. With a franchise quarterback already in place, that organization is far more likely to chase an offensive-minded head coach than a defensive one. That alone takes one of the most appealing jobs off the board for Saleh. The same thing applies to several other openings where the interview lists and early reporting point heavily toward offensive coordinators or quarterback-focused leaders. And then there's the sheer volume of candidates. This cycle is crowded. You've got experienced head coaches, hot coordinators, and familiar names all competing for the same jobs. In a year like this, teams don't feel pressure to settle. They can wait. They can be picky. And when that happens, someone like Saleh, who already has a stable and respected role, doesn't feel forced to jump at the first offer that comes along. This is where his past experience matters. He's already been ahead. Coach. He knows how hard it is when the situation isn't right. That changes the calculus. He's not chasing any job just to say yes. And when you pair that with what he's built defensively this season, especially with younger players gaining real reps, the appeal of staying another year becomes very real. Second and third years in a system are often where defenses take a big leap, and Saleh knows that. So let me ask you this. Would you rather see continuity on defense for one more year, or would you be okay starting over with someone new? There's no wrong answer, but I'm really curious where you land on that. Drop your take in the comments, and if you think Saleh deserves serious recognition for what this defense did, even through injuries, hit like and make sure you're subscribed as we push toward 1,000 subs. Because this decision doesn't just affect coaching. It directly impacts who stays, who goes, and how the 49ers build this roster over the next few months. And once you see how many important players are tied to that decision, you'll understand why this development might be even bigger than it seems. This is where everything starts to connect, because coaching stability isn't some abstract concept. It shows up directly in the names you keep and the ones you let walk. And when you look at the 49ers' upcoming free agents, especially on defense, it becomes clear why having Robert Saleh in place could matter more than most fans realize. There are a lot of defensive linemen and role players whose futures aren't locked in yet, and those decisions don't happen in a vacuum. They're tied to scheme fit, trust, and development. Guys who were brought in, coached up, and put in positions to succeed under this staff are much easier to evaluate if the same voice is making the call. If Saleh stays, there's continuity in how players like these are graded, used, and potentially retained. If he leaves, that whole evaluation process resets. You also have restricted free agents mixed in, which gives the 49ers some leverage, but also requires clarity. Those are the situations where coaching input matters most, because you're deciding whether a player is worth committing to based on what you believe they can still become. Special teams contributors and depth defenders fall into that category too. They might not make headlines, but they're the kind of players that quietly decide games over a long season. Even when you slide over to the offensive side, the same theme applies. There are a few names that stand out, and one in particular that fans are understandably nervous about. Keeping the locker room together isn't just about contracts, it's about direction. Players want to know what the plan is. They want to know who's leading, what the system looks like, and whether the team is building on something or starting over. So here's a question for you. If you could only keep one upcoming free agent, who would it be and why? Drop that in the comments, because it says a lot about how to view this roster and what you value most. And if you want more deep dives like this into free agency and roster building, make sure you're subscribed and help get this channel to 1,000 subscribers. There's a lot coming, and this is just the beginning. Because when you step back and look at the full picture, this offseason doesn't feel chaotic. It feels structured. Health is trending in the right direction. Coaching stability is more realistic than people think, and the roster decisions, while important, are manageable. That combination is why the arrow might actually be pointing up, even if it doesn't feel that way yet. When you put all of this together, it's hard not to come away feeling better about where the 49ers are headed. That doesn't mean there aren't real decisions coming, because there absolutely are, but the difference now is that those decisions are being made from a position of clarity instead of uncertainty. And that's a big deal for a team that still very much sees itself in a championship window. You've got key players entering the offseason without major medical roadblocks. You've got a defensive coordinator whose chances of staying are stronger than most people expected, simply because the league landscape shifted in the 49ers' favor. And you've got a roster that, while facing turnover, isn't being ripped down to the studs. That's not nothing. That's the kind of setup teams hope for when a season ends. This is also why I think it's important to slow down the doom and gloom reactions. The offseason is long and narratives change fast, but right now the 49ers are positioned to be deliberate instead of reactive. They can prioritize continuity where it matters, upgrade where it's needed, and build on what already works instead of starting from scratch. That's how good teams stay relevant year after year. So let me ask you one last thing. Do you feel better about the 49ers heading into this offseason now than you did before watching this video? Yes or no? I really want to see how many people feel that shift, because that tells the story better than anything else. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to stay locked in all offseason long, make sure you're subscribed and help push this channel toward 1,000 subscribers. Hit the like button if you appreciate honest, level-headed for Niners talk, and drop a comment with what you want covered next. Free agency, the draft, coaching upgrades, whatever's on your mind.